Today, I am bringing you a study. This is just one I ran across in mainstream news. I will say that it has a different ending than I thought it was going to. I was very surprised with this. It doesn't really change my mind on things, but it has a different ending than I thought it did. Hi, my name is Rebecca. I am a physician. I have lost 60 pounds on a whole foods plant-based diet. So, reading through, just doom scrolling, and I come across an article titled, "Weight Loss Medication May Also Benefit Common Medical Problem, Study Finds." I'm curious with this, but I'm like, okay, well, let's take a look into it and let's sort of see what it says. Now, I am actually kind of gonna read along with it and give you a little bit of my opinion on it. So it's sort of like a reaction video. So semaglutide and liraglutide, but weight loss medications known as the GLP-1 or the glucagon-like peptide 1 agonists, which have gained popularity for treating type 2 diabetes and obesity. And what they have found is that it can also reduce alcohol intake. So international researchers in Ireland and Saudi Arabia, they followed only 262 patients. So it's a low number, but it's a great starting point. Adult patients with obesity who started taking, I guess, one of two of the GLP-1 medications, both the liraglutide and the semaglutide. And among regular drinkers, which was not all of them, but regular drinkers, weekly alcohol intake decreased by 68%. That is 2 in 3. That is pretty good. And while we don't typically do units in the United States here, they say that the units decreased from 23 down to 8. So I still think, and that's per week, I still think that's actually pretty good. That's positive. I like that. That's positive. The findings were recently published, Journal of Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism, and it was also presented at the European Congress on Obesity in Spain. And I'm guessing it was 2025. And so it kind of goes into how they work. We kind of know how they work in that the GLP-1 agonists mimic a hormone called GLP-1, which is released from the GI tract after eating. And the medications, the GLP-1 receptors are in the brain, not in the GI tract. The medications activate GLP-1 receptors in the brain, decreasing the sense of reward that people feel after eating or drinking. So, guess food and alcohol addictions. It is this commonality of function that suggests that the GLP-1 receptors in the brain may be a therapeutic target for not just the disease of obesity, but also for alcohol disorder. Before the participants started on the drugs, they had to fill out a questionnaire. They self-reported the amount of alcohol. I don't know the percentage of patients that would lie on that, but let's just say it is a self-report, which means that it is subjective and not really objective. Approximately 72% of the participants, so I'm guessing that's of the 262, had at least 2 follow-up visits, and 68% reported regular alcohol consumption. So already we know that only 2/3 of the 262 actually drank. After starting the weight loss medications, participants' weekly average alcohol intake decreased by almost 2/3, from approximately 11 units down to 4 after the treatment with the GLP-1s. The reduction in alcohol use was compatible to the decrease that can be seen achieved by nalmefene. Now that was a new drug for me, or at least a new drug name for me. So I did look that up, and that is, I know I've talked about this in previous videos where I say that there are a few different drugs that actually combat alcohol disorder. One of them is actually the drug that reverses opioid overdosing. And that is what this drug is. And It's a drug that decreases the buzz feeling that you get when you drink alcohol. So for 188 patients who were followed over an average of 4 months, none had increased their alcohol after starting the weight loss medications. And I will say that is what surprised me the most. And the reason is that what they found when they really started doing a lot of the bariatric surgery or the like the stomach stapling or even lap bands and things like that is that patients still had an addictive personality because a lot of them were food addicts. They had an addictive personality, and because they decreased the size of the stomach, they couldn't overeat, but they could still actually drink alcohol. And so they sort of traded, in a lot of cases, one addiction for another. That's what really surprised me the most. Patients reported that after an evening meal, they were too full to have their usual drink, I guess, after dinner. And when they did drink, they reported becoming full extremely quickly and drinking at a slower pace. Kind of wondered too if there was decreased uptake or slower uptake of the alcohol, so you also didn't get to that buzzed feeling. The findings in this study suggest that we may have found a therapeutic target for the alcohol use disorder. This suggests that the experience was less enjoyable, partly due to the reduced rate of alcohol absorption. So you just weren't getting that high quick enough, and then you realized you were full, and it was less enjoyable to you. Some patients also reported that they didn't enjoy the flavor of alcohol beverages as much, and also that hangovers were much worse. I'm thinking that they didn't get the high fast enough, therefore they started actually tasting the alcohol. Sort of like, you know, if you're a really big beer drinker and you move to alcohol-free beer and then you realize that you never actually liked the taste of beer and it was just the high that you were getting. Maybe that as much. And also their hangovers were much worse. So I'm wondering if it also decreased the metabolism of the alcohol molecule itself in the body, and that metabolism was slow and it was working its way out at a slower pace. So you just felt like crap longer. You kind of had that flu feeling. All of these experiences showed that the weight loss medication create a guardrails that prevent most patients from drinking excessively, giving them a degree of control over the alcohol intake. That is a positive. The findings in this study suggest that we may have found a therapeutic agent for alcohol use disorder, the GLP-1 receptor. This finding potentially opens up the possibility of an entirely new pharmaceutical treatment paradigm. I don't believe that we should be actually completely dependent on drug companies. That's why I had that face. That's the only reason I had that face. But I also understand that with addictions like alcohol and drugs and things of that nature, that behavior therapy alone sometimes doesn't do the job. And I understand that maybe taking the pills is better than drinking the alcohol. So I am giving them that one. Oh, and they do say, which could be used in conjunction with conventional methods, such as behavior therapy, i.e. Just talking to therapists, and group support like in AA meetings and things of that nature. So, potential limitations on this study. Relatively small number of patients. We kind of talked about that. Also, the researchers were not able to verify the patient's self-reported alcohol intake, and roughly 1/3 of them were not available for follow-up. 1/3's a pretty high number. But I will also say that most people will say they drink less than say they drink more. Let's say it was 11 units. There's an entirely good chance that they actually drank 15 to 18. We kind of say double. It could be even higher than that. So yes, we couldn't actually measure what they self-reported, but most patients, when asked that question, if they are not going to be truthful, because I know all of y'all would be truthful, but most will edge down than edge up. I'm thinking that if they were honest, that it really did come down. and maybe even came down more than they thought it did. There was also no control group, which would be great if they could do a study that also had a control group in there so they would know a little bit more for sure. And then randomized controlled trials, which would have a control group and it would be very uniform where they could truly, and evidently there is a trial currently going on in Denmark. So hopefully we will hear something about that. And then it just kind of goes into what is now actually available pharmacologically to help with alcohol use. One is the disulfiram or Antabuse, which I am on, which kind of takes away your ability to metabolize alcohol for at least 5 days. So I take a daily pill, and if I were to choose to imbibe, then I need at least 5 days notice, which for me actually works out pretty well. There is another one, which is the naltrexone, which probably is very close to the one I was talking about earlier, the nalmefene, which helps decrease the cravings by reducing the buzz that you get. And I've talked to one of my patients who I just noticed was on it, and I had questions. I think the half-life on that is way longer, and she really thought that it did very well for her. A Camprostate, which restores the balance of hormones in the brain to reduce cravings. I actually have never heard of that one before, according to the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. But that less than 10% of people with alcohol use disorder get the proper treatment, with many resuming use within the first year of treatment. That's actually pretty accurate. The main advantage of the GLP-1 agonists is that they only need to be taken once a week. So once you've made the decision to take it once a week, then you don't have to take it on a daily basis like I do, and continue to work for that entire week. Basically, this is let's see what the new study or the next study show. This might actually help. If you have had an experience with the GLP-1s and feel comfortable kind of saying what your history with alcohol since taking them is, I would love to hear it. I truly would. I will say though that I'm still a big believer in no GLP-1s, and I have an entire video on why I as a physician would not take them. So I'm just kind of curious what your feelings would be. Thank you very much for being here, and I will link this article below as well. Smash that like button if you got anything from it, and come along for the ride. I'm going to be here for a good 70 pounds or so to get down to a healthy BMI of 25. Bye, guys.